surprise of the week, which is not really a surprise because we've talked about it, but certainly it'll be fascinating. It is a demonstration by an explosive detection dog named Barbie. And the demonstration will be led by MSA Security. And at this point in time, I would invite Barbie and her entourage to come down the center aisle. To our applause. There she is coming down. Believe me, she's cute, she's sweet. We've had fun with her at the booth, and you can see it after. She won't be signing autographs today, but you can see her a bit later anyway. And to lead us into the presentation today, it's my pleasure to invite to the lectern Justin Kelly, who is the Vice President of Operations of MSA. So Justin, where are you? There he is. The floor is yours. The microphone is yours.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Denny. Thank you, Rapiscan. Great lunch. I think this was the quickest time we ever had people come back into the hall. I think Barbie had something to do with that as well. So with that introduction, I am with MSA Security. We are a company that's based in New York City, but we have a global footprint, as you'll be able to tell by the slides being presented. We have over 700 explosive detection canine teams throughout the world, deployed in air cargo. And you'll see a slight demonstration on some brake bulk that we have out here today through Barbie and Serena. They've been paired together for about 7 months. Barbie is a 2-year-old black lab, as you can tell. We use both the sporting breed and the herding breed in air cargo. And we have found, as you can tell by the timeline that we set forth, that we've been in the air cargo industry for a number of years, dating back 2012, 2011. We became involved in this basically as another layer of security, a much more efficient layer, a quicker layer, and one that has been proven and time tested as far as the speed in which the canine can detect accurately explosive odors. Our teams are imprinted on 32 separate odors of explosives to include HME products, which we know that is a huge threat from the terrorist element that's out there today. So they are imprinted on the 32 explosive odors. They have a HME imprintation as well through homemade explosives. And we feel really that is the backbone of any successful program. All right, really getting your dogs, getting your teams on live odor on a frequent basis. We are independently tested and certified. With the 2018 in the fourth quarter, TSA came out with a 3P canine program, which we were the first company to be certified under that program, and we currently have just under 100 teams that are 3P canine certified. There are a lot of compliance and regulatory aspects of that program, which you need to fulfill on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis to remain in the program. It's quite involved, and for good reason, because if you're going to be in this program, as we've all, we're all here for the same reason. It's security-based, and it's doing it in a safe manner. And with that, I'll just have Serena and her partner, Barbie, conduct a brief walkthrough of these boxes. Through our testing, through the 3P Canine in our partnership with TSA, we can do a pallet or a skid in about 6 seconds, really cutting down on the time and the footprint that's required for proper screening. The canine team Barbie is trained in a passive response, so the dog will lay or sit, indicating on what is the hot box. As you can see, Barbie is a food reward black lab. We both have food and play. Serena is now making the next presentation to ensure that Barbie's saying, no, Serena, it's right here. I'm not leaving the box. So it is a passive response. It is a food response, Pavlovian in nature. But the speed and the skill set that these teams display are not touched by any other method that we have out there. ETD, X-ray, as far as what is needed to have a proper screening program, a small footprint. You know, we go to the cargo does not have to come to us, which is a huge seller for this. So, Serena, if you will, just head off stage, and I'm going to juggle this up a little bit. Barbie works for food, as you can tell. Every day, Barbie's on food. Every day, Barbie has to eat. All right? No matter if it's off, on, working, vacation, Barbie gets fed out of the hand of the handler. You'll see that Serena has a directed search method. It's shown in the air cargo environment with the amount of cargo that's happening, the dynamic flow of cargo, whether it be in a hub. It's extremely important to have control of the EDD, and we find that through a directed search method. One, it's controlled. Two, it has that bonding with the handler. The handler and the canine are paired together. They're not kenneled. They live together. That's other parts of the world, we do have kenneling, but it's one handler, one dog. We feel that bonding is extremely important to be successful in the program. It's been tried and true. Serena will work Barbie. They'll be a team together. I would say going on 6 more years, 6.5 more years. They'll be working together. And as you can tell, only being out a brief 7 months, they're an extremely efficient team. And as I wanted to go back a little bit to the timeline that was previously mentioned, it's up on the board. This is something that with ICAO dropping in 2021, we're working with regulators throughout the world, right? And we're helping them establish their programs as far as proper procedures utilizing EDTs in the screening arena. All right, it's very important. It's important that if you partner with an EDD company, that one, you have the wherewithal and the knowledge that they have the backbone to support this operation. There's a lot of involvement here on both the company side as well as the regulatory side. So we're fortunate enough to have been in this arena 2012, that we have worked hand in glove with other regulators throughout the world to help them establish their programs. So if there's anything that we can answer for you while we're here for the next couple of days as a regulatory entity of a particular country, we'd be happy to speak with you. We've been through it, the basics from ground zero all the way up. So with that, I want to thank ICAO for giving us the time. We appreciate having this opportunity to present in front of you, and we look forward to seeing you at the booth. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Right on time. Yeah. And we're right on time. Everyone's here, 2 o'clock. Terrific. We can launch the program. So we'll do a bit of staging here. We'll take the boxes off. And at the same time, I would ask the panelists and the moderator of the next session to come on stage. And just a reminder that there is an article in the program on the dogs, the detection dogs. And if you want to take a look at it, of course, I believe you all received a copy of the program. Very interesting, very interesting. Okay, so we'll be setting up. And we have our great panelists coming on. David, please. Okay.
voting right now, but you will see the audience questions on the right, or on the left coming in. But this is what we're approving, so when you pay attention to the ones on the right,
Okay.
don't touch the screen.
Okay. Cool. Great. Right.
So thank you for your patience. We're ready to go with the session already. The subject matter is capacity building. Building on this morning's session related to oversight and quality assurance, we now turn our sights to assistance in helping to resolve security issues. The session will focus on reaching the right balance between competing priorities and limited resources, a subject that we did broach somewhat this morning. Our moderator is David Sterland. David is Chief of the Implementation Support and Development Security Section at ICAO. A few words about David, but not too much, I promise. David has been working in the air transport industry since 1988, specializing in aviation security and facilitation since 1999. He held management roles with British Airways, the UAE Department of Transport, and airport operator BAA. He joined ICAO in 2011 and held aviation security and facilitation roles in headquarters and the Middle East Regional Office in Cairo. David was named to his current position in January 2018, where his work focuses on providing aviation security assistance and training to member states of ICAO. How was that, David? Okay. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Denis, for that, and thank you to the panel who've joined us this afternoon for this session. I thought I would give you a very quick overview of the session, an idea of the timing, so you know when you're going to get some relief with coffee, which is going to be at 3 o'clock through to 3:30. So that's in the bag. This session, really now through until about 4:30, 4:45 per the program, focusing on capacity building and providing aviation security assistance. So, as we all know, AVSEC assistance is a key tool in resolving the issues highlighted through the quality assurance process that you heard about this morning. So covering many, many different ways of providing help to states, from training through mentoring, partnerships, provision of equipment, and so on. So this session is going to focus on really the lessons learned in providing assistance, drawing on the expertise and experience of the panel here, and also from the audience with your own questions as well. And we'll be talking a little bit about the priorities that we have to balance and the resources that we have available for providing help. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do a very, very brief overview of the subject. First of all, I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get into the format that you've seen over the last couple of days with a couple of audience polls. I think one before coffee. I think both of them before coffee, actually. We'll take the results of one before we break and then one afterwards. Also, your questions to us. We'll be receiving those and taking some of those as we go through the whole of the session. And then I've got some questions that we've already prepared with the moderators to really get from them their thoughts and their experience. So the first thing that I should do is to invite, just to tell you who we've got here, first of all. So we've got, on my left, Poppy Koza, who's the Director of Civil Aviation for the South African Civil Aviation Authority. I'm sure you saw Poppy yesterday morning at the opening session. Bernard Lim, Senior Director, International Relations and Security from the Ministry of Transport of Singapore. I know Bernard will be familiar to many of you. Hugo Porter, Manager Security from the New Zealand Civil Aviation Authority. Laurie Silcox, Section Chief, Transportation Security Sector Assistance from the US TSA. And Richard Skinner, General Manager of Hong Kong International Aviation Academy, which is also one of the ICAO aviation security training centers. So without further ado, I'll hand over to the panel members so that they can give a quick introduction, and then we'll carry on with the proceedings.
Okay, I've got a microphone, so I'll start. Thanks, David, for the invitation to the panel. I originally come from UK. I've spent 33 years in Hong Kong, working and living. The last 2.5 years I've spent as the general manager of the Hong Kong International Aviation Academy. This is a brand new institution mandated by the government to basically provide ostensibly two purposes, is to support the development of Hong Kong's own aviation industry, as well as to establish ourselves as a regional training hub, very much in the same way we have in Singapore and Seoul. That really stems from the fact that Hong Kong is going through the 3RS system, the third runway system, which is basically akin to a brand new airport, and we need to increase capacity quite remarkably. That's on the civil aviation side. On the AVSEC side, we have a very long history of producing and developing AVSEC courses, not only for Hong Kong, but also throughout the Asia-Pacific region. And I was fortunate enough to work within that company for a number of years, both on the operations side, access control and screening, terminal operations management, but also on the aviation security training front as well. Majority of my time in Hong Kong has been spent in law enforcement. I spent 26 years in the Hong Kong Police, of which most of my time was criminal investigation units, and a good deal of that was involved in international organised crime. And one of the things I'm fascinated about when I transitioned into AVSEC were the similarities between the global security picture that policing faces and that of aviation security. The similarities in terms of requirements for a very dynamic and changeable environment, the fact we need capacity building, the fact that we need more skill sets, the fact that we need to use technology more is equally applicable to the challenges that are facing policing, and AVSEC are exactly the same, which is actually quite interesting. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. So those of you who don't know me, I'm Hugo Porter. I apologise now for my Kiwi accent, but go the All Blacks. And that was a dig at Poppy, really, around the South Africa and the events that are coming up in Japan in the next few weeks. So, like Richard, I come from a policing background. I was in the police for just under 26 years, similar to Richard as well, doing criminal investigation work for a majority of that time, and then moved into the aviation sector about 12.5 years ago now. And in my role in New Zealand, we do regulatory oversight in respect of all participants in the aviation system that have a security component. But on the capacity side, New Zealand's very heavily invested in providing capacity building in the Pacific Island states. So all 11 Pacific Island states receive assistance from New Zealand and funded by the New Zealand government through our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Moving into a phase very shortly where we're going to be providing a lot of updated technology to 9 of those 11 states, and 2 of them have funded some of that equipment themselves on top of that. We have 1 full-time person in New Zealand that's then allocated as a resource to travel to all of those 11 Pacific Island states on a very regular basis, and also is heavily involved in working with the Trans-Tasman crime units, investigation units, as well as a lot of the customs and immigration units around the movement of people through the Pacific Islands, because that's often seen as a transshipment point for a lot of crime that comes from elsewhere, primarily going into, mainly drug-based, into New Zealand and Australia. So with that assistance program, we have just recently had a heads of regulators meeting, or a regulators meeting along with operators within Samoa, and they discuss with us a lot of the problems that they have. So we took that on board. So we're listening to their needs, but we're not going in there and doing the job for them. And I think that's become an important factor in the way that capacity is given. So we give some training, a part of that capacity. We then mentor, and we do leadership courses, and we coach certain staff to do certain roles and functions. Unlike some capacity that's been offered around the world in the past, where states have moved in pretty much to another state and pretty much taken over the environment to deliver that capacity. But we certainly make sure that the ownership of what they need to do as an individual state is taken on board by them so they can develop that capacity going into the future and develop their own internal systems and networks. So that's just a brief overview about what we do in the Pacific, and I'll hand over to Laurie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Laurie Silcox with the United States Transportation Security Administration. I've been with TSA since 2002, at which point I started out in domestic screening operations, moved into supervisory positions, and then on to domestic training. And I've been working in the international arena for TSA since 2010 in the area of capacity building. So as far as TSA is concerned, we try to focus our capacity building approach in a risk-based approach. So basically, we want to ensure that we're looking at vulnerabilities, we're looking at regional threats, and that we're trying to take more of a regionalized approach to determine where we can best provide assistance. I just want to say thank you for having me on the panel today. I'm very excited to be here and looking forward to a fruitful discussion this afternoon.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bernard Lim from the Ministry of Transport Singapore. So first, let me thank ICAO for inviting me to be on this panel, and thank David Sterland for putting it together with Katie Smith. And of course, thank to all of you for being here this afternoon to be with us. I come from an aviation background, starting in airport operations, and I've been in this business on aviation security since 1996. A bit about myself. I was the chairman of the ICAO Aviation Security Panel from 2011 to 2015. I was the chair of the task force that developed the ICAO Comprehensive Aviation Security Strategy and the Global Aviation Security Plan. I'm also a certified aviation security trainer by ICAO. In terms of capacity building and training, I have done various in terms of courses, training programs, either locally or together with partners from around the world. I shall spare you additional details on that, but most importantly this afternoon, I'd like to invite all of you to ask this panel as many questions as you can and as many questions as you like. I would hope that this session will be interactive and not just us saying things or talking, but I'd like you to engage with us and for us to engage with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard, and thanks to ICAO once again for inviting me to be part of this panel. When Bernard was introducing himself, he mentioned that he was the chairman of the ICAO panel, ICAO AFSEC panel. What he did not mention is that he passed the baton to me, and I also passed the baton to Hugo. So on this panel, we have really capacity built. So there is some capacity building that happened here as well. And I saw one of our colleagues from France, Sonia. I was hoping that she would be here. She's somewhere there, whom Hugo has passed the baton to. So quite interesting. I've been in civil aviation. In fact, I've never been engaged in any other sector except civil aviation. I know nothing else except civil aviation. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm quite delighted to be part of this very dynamic industry, and I believe I wouldn't trade it for anything. So I'm not sure whether I should say I'm here to stay or not. So yeah, I'm from South Africa. I'm currently the head of the South African Civil Aviation Authority. Worked for an airline, airport experience, and now the regulatory authority, and a little bit of ICAO. So It's been amazing. So our approach on the topic, capacity building is very key, considering that we have in fact come a long way in terms of developing aviation security to where it is under the leadership of ICAO, and I believe that we still have a long way to go, particularly in uplifting the countries who need assistance. If you look at the statistics or the ICAO results, the audit results, that graph, you can see that, in fact, capacity building is something that is going to stay with us for the next few years until we get those states who have the effective implementation rating below the global average to get to cooperate and assist each other to get to a level where we can safely say we have done our part. So for as long as we still have some states who are still struggling with the issues of compliance, it then becomes important that we restructure our conversation towards a more targeted outcome-based approach in terms of assisting. I was reflecting just last night in terms of each and every panel meeting that I've attended, the assembly, ICAO assembly sessions that I've attended. We have always been talking about the issues of capacity building to an extent that ICAO even introduced a section that deals with implementation support and development. But if we think about the investment that is made, I'm not so sure whether it does equate to the outcomes that we see. And perhaps our discussion needs to be structured differently to say what is it that we are not getting right. What are the real issues that we are dealing with which prevent us to be at a particular level? Because one of the panel members in other panels was talking about we cannot be safe or secure if we still have vulnerabilities in the system. Again, because civil aviation is a global business, so any vulnerability that exists in one state could equally affect another state. So I'm very interested in the conversations and the discussions of this panel to explore many ways in terms of what do we do next to reconfigure the manner in which we do things under, of course, the leadership of ICAO, such that we are able to get all states to a particular level of compliance and that security culture that we want to see. Whilst we also talk about the issues of capacity building, it will be interesting to also tap into the issues of the role of innovation in terms of capacitating, those states and looking at innovative ways of leapfrogging, looking at innovative ways which will assist the states or emerging economies or developing countries perhaps to introduce systems and processes that are less, or rather that are cost effective, because we know and appreciate that aviation infrastructure is very expensive. So the question is, for a state that is struggling between balancing aviation safety, security, and socioeconomic issues, what is it that can happen, or what is it that we need to do to introduce innovation, still achieving the outcome, still ensuring that our aviation borders are safe and secure, but in a very cost-effective manner. So I'll be very interested in those discussions. Thank you.
So thanks to the panel for kicking us off, and it's clear, isn't it, that we have a huge amount of experience and diverse experience to draw upon this afternoon in our discussions. So I'm going to be very brief And really, we just were thinking before the session the sort of ideas or the key things to think about when doing this work. This is a global challenge, and I think Poppy has really put a finger on the button there on that one. And the shortfalls, the challenges in implementing aviation security, is it lack of will, lack of focus, lack of prioritization? Is it a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding? Or is it a lack of resources, a lack of infrastructure? When we're providing assistance as donors, trying to help others, what do we need to be doing? And also, what do we need the people that we're helping? What do we need them to be doing as well so it can be successful? That this needs to be a long-term commitment. It needs to be a consistent commitment, a consistent engagement. This stuff does not happen overnight. Critically, that we have the right people engaged when we go to provide assistance. Are we talking to the right people? Are we really working with the right guys to be able to make progress? Some of my colleagues keep reminding me also, we need to focus on the root cause. If we can determine that, how can we fix it? How can we improve things in a way that they'll stay improved? So many of you will be living this, I guess, as you do your jobs, the political commitment, working with senior management, senior government people, your role in the aviation authorities, and those of you who are involved in implementing AVSEC in the front line. So different levels, different layers, each with a role to play, each with different requirements. Infrastructure, just thinking about equipment, about operations, and I think something that was touched upon yesterday, the fact that the airports are now full again of passengers as the business continues to grow and grow. And how do we process those people and keep the operation moving, but also deliver a secure and a safe operation? So that's a big challenge, and that's something I guess we'll touch on as we go along. How do we hire enough security staff? How do we make sure we can retain them, train them, motivate them, pay them, give them career development? Knowledge, understanding, thinking about training. This weekend, thanks to the efforts of Singapore, we have a high-level training for Directors General of Civil Aviation, talking about the role of AVSEC and how it impacts on the work they have to do at that very high level within the administration, all the way through the training program that ICAO and many others are involved in delivering, helping frontline staff, supervisors, operational managers, and the staff who work for the authorities who have to do the oversight. So lots of teaching, lots of education, lots of sharing of knowledge and information. So that's all I'm going to say about that. That's just a little bit of background, maybe just tossing some ideas out there. And so what I'm going to do now is to move on and start off with a couple of questions to the panel here. In the meantime, we have questions coming in at all? We already have some questions coming in as well from the audience, which is great. So I think I might ask one of my questions, and then I think we'll cut straight away and ask one of yours as well. Okay. Cool. Just need that, right? Okay, which one? Just go to the first one, yeah? That's fine. That's one you've got. Perfect. I can't see that. No, I can see that. Okay, so I think it says there, priorities for aviation security assistance. You're seeing the same as I am. Okay, so I'm going to ask Poppy the first question, which really is around, we've talked a little bit about priorities, but Poppy, this is really around priorities. What are your priorities in how you develop and deliver aviation security assistance?
So, thanks, David. Just recently, so South Africa has, consistent with ICAO's No Country Left Behind program, has been providing technical assistance to some of the neighboring countries, in particular within the SADC region. But our view was that we kept on receiving the requests for technical assistance, which were very ad hoc in nature. And the question was, how do we plan better so that we don't find ourselves perhaps turning down a request because perhaps we are very thin on resources, both financially as well as human resources. We then decided that it would be good if we were to, from a regional perspective, reach out to the SADC region countries, expressing an interest and also indicating that we were looking at coming up with a strategy to structure our technical assistance or technical cooperation missions. So we did that. So we wrote to all 15 SADC countries, and we said, given the fact that we were receiving requests on an ad hoc basis, what is it that we can cooperate amongst ourselves? Because it's not an issue of South Africa providing assistance, but it's also an issue of South Africa learning from other countries as well. We then developed a strategy which we call a regional cooperation strategy, of course having a regard to the responses that we had received. And that strategy was really to assist us to structure our technical assistance missions, assist us in terms of planning for human resources as well as financially. It was quite pleasing to receive responses which were quite targeted, indicating what is it, that the other states would want us to cooperate on. And that assisted us to come up with a strategy that was well funded, which we could take to our board of directors as well as our ministry, to say these are the countries that we wish to assist in the financial year. So the priority in terms of particularly the criteria as to which country gets prioritized first, it was the issue of those that were going to be audited by ICAO in the very near future to try and see what kind of assistance or immediate assistance that was required. We also looked at the issues of development. Particular state would say we are busy developing our civil aviation and therefore would require assistance in these areas. So based on the collation of information, coming up with a plan, we were then able to enter into memorandum of agreements, because to us it was very key or critical that it is not a one-way approach, but we had to agree. So our agreement would pretty much lay down the expectations from South Africa, who would be providing assistance, and a state who is requesting assistance. The benefit, in our view, is that one, then there is political willingness for both parties to engage in an assistance. It's not an issue of South Africa going to a particular state and say, we do have funds available, where do you want us to assist? It had to be a collaborative approach, which is properly agreed upon. The expectations are laid out, and we all understand our obligations towards whatever cooperation that had to be undertaken. And of course, we would then continue agree on the dates, the scope, and so on. So pretty much our approach has always been that firstly, those who require assistance, they must first acknowledge that they do require assistance. And then from South Africa, who would be providing assistance, must also be willing to give resources, human, as well as financially. We also believed that the kind of assistance had to be fit for purpose, and it needed to also equip another state to be able to stand alone even after we are no longer there. So the issues of longevity and the staying power was also important, because we strongly believe that any assistance that is provided, it needs to be meaningful and it must contribute in terms of making a difference. So I think in a nutshell, it was really about structuring the technical cooperation or technical assistance missions such that they are beneficial to both parties without necessarily being seen to be imposing yeah. So that's pretty much how it goes, yeah.
Poppy, thank you for that. That's a very comprehensive response. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the first question that we've had. We've had a few questions coming in, but the one that seems to be on the top here. I think Bernard, if I can ask you, this is a very short question here, but it's a very tricky one in the challenge they're presenting to us. How can the capacity building approach deal with a lack of political will?
Okay, thank you, David, and thank you for whoever who posed that very interesting question. How can capacity building approach deal with a lack of political will? So, the problem statement here is about political will. I think the first question to ask about this question is, why is there a lack of political will? So, I would say that for political will to support capacity building in aviation security, the decision makers need to first understand why is this important. If they don't understand why this is important, then they will never give you the will to support you. That means it's about educating the decision makers above you and me that this is important. For example, the 193 member states of ICAO have to comply with the aviation security standards laid out in the annexes of the Chicago Convention. Those are mandatory. And if a state does not meet those standards, then most of you are familiar with the ICAO processes. There's the audits and etc. And states can find themselves in a very disadvantageous situation, not only for themselves politically, but economically, because the aviation industry and the stakeholders would be in a difficult position. What is this difficult position? That difficult position is that your entire state's aviation industry and ecosystem is deemed to be insecure. And when it's deemed to be insecure, it will raise questions amongst, for example, airlines. Why should I be flying to that state? And amongst passengers, why should I be going there? Is it safe? And amongst business, tourists, you name it, the whole ecosystem starts to expand. National, international economy and trade comes to question that if this particular state's aviation security regime and system is weak, it is going to be a problem. So that is the problem statement that you and I need to explain to the decision makers to understand that it is not about just capacity building for the sake of capacity building. It's not about training or giving aviation security training for the sake of giving training. It is about providing this capacity building and training towards a far critical and larger national and even international outcome that is going to be beneficial to everybody. That is where we have to try to engage with the decision makers that there is a need, and therefore if they understand the need, it is not localized, it is far larger than that, and the repercussions can be tremendous. Hopefully then you make headway to say, therefore we need capacity building. Of course, you can ask the question, and what if political will still doesn't come? Ladies and gentlemen, my question to you is therefore, can you make a difference? Many of us would just give up because if, let's say, the boss says, no, capacity building is not important, planting trees in the airport is more important, you would plant trees to get your bonus, right? The way to deal with this is you must first believe in it. That means you and I need to believe that this capacity building and training is important. If you believe in it, then you just keep up your hopes and don't give up educating the people who need to know. Will political will ever come eventually? In my experience, the answer is yes. Some faster than others, because in the global aviation security system, the ICAO will conduct the universal security audits. And when the audits are done for the state, the results are presented to the decision makers of your state. And if the results show that there are serious deficiencies, it is something that no one is going to be proud about. They'll not be happy with. It is about time to fix it. The last point I'd like to make at this moment about political will is really called sustainability. To have the will to do something requires the energy to sustain it. There's no point saying that you have my full support and after you walk out of the door, that's it. Everything's forgotten. You need to sustain it. So political will has to be sustained. And as you and I know, decision makers change. After a few years, a new person comes in, you start all over again. You try to teach them all over again, explain to them all over again. And that's where you may be back to square one. Therefore, I say don't give up. There are ways to show, and there are ways to put your message across on the importance. And the importance is not localized. I go back to what I say. We need to look at aviation security from a macro point of view, an ecosystem point of view. If there's one weak link in your ecosystem, your system is weak, because that is where the bad guys will look for and infiltrate. And that's the last thing you want. So I hope I've answered your question. Thank you.
Bernard, thank you for that. So I'm going to move on to the second question. Just coming up there. So this is for Laurie. Laurie, in providing capacity building, what are the main constraints that you face in doing your job?
Thank you. Resources, resources, resources. I don't think there's any state out there that doesn't have a resource issue when providing assistance, whether that be personnel resources, whether that be funding, or whether it be any type of, let's say, ability to sustain things. But if we're focusing on resources, I know as far as TSA is concerned, one of our biggest issues is the way that we can utilize our funds to deliver capacity development. So, for example, we can certainly create training packages. We can certainly send instructors to deliver those training packages. But when it comes to being able to fund a location to hold a training session, we have constraints with that. We have constraints with bringing in individuals for, say, a regional event. So we're not able to legally fund the travel of participants. So what do we do to overcome those constraints? And I think the biggest thing here is we need to rely on partnerships. So we need to look at other states, and we need to seriously ask ourselves, where do we succeed, and what are our shortcomings? And no state can do it alone. So we can't just go out and use the resources that we have, as limited as they may be, and fix every problem in every state around the world. So we need to partner up with other states who have similar interests. And I think in this community, we all have similar interests in improving aviation security around the world. But we need to utilize those other states to fill the gaps that we can't fill on our own. So for example, I can go to a state partner, or I can go to an ICAO ASTC or even an ICAO regional office and ask them if they could provide a facility that we can conduct training in. We can go to another state who may have the legal authority to utilize funding for participant travel. And so we can ask another state to fund the travel if we provide the assistance package and the instructors. And so we've been successful a number of times in doing so. And I think we all just need to take some time to remember to talk with each other. In addition, another thought is getting the ICAO regional offices more involved. So the ICAO regional offices are experts in their regions, right? So if we actually work with the ICAO regional offices, they can help us to better determine what are the major vulnerabilities in this region. Okay, what are the trends that we continue to see in this region? What are the threats that we should be concerned about in this region? And so if we can partner with those international offices, then we can get a better idea of the regional vulnerabilities and how to best address those regional vulnerabilities in a multi-state approach. And I think that's good. Thank you.
Laurie, that's great. Thank you very much. And I'll just build on that to plug for the regional offices. So it's a great resource that we have across the world, and we have our regional officers looking after AVSEC and facilitation, and supported by the regional directors above them with the links into the highest levels in the authorities. So this is a point I'm often making, talking with partners when we're doing this work. Please use us. Make use of that network. Make use of those contacts, so that at least at the initial thing we can make sure that we've got the right people talking to each other. And as Laurie says, the expertise within the region, it's their region, they come from that region, they speak the languages of that region, and they know their requirements much better. So please use them. And of course, we have colleagues here from the regional offices. If you want introductions, please go directly or come through us and we can help with that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to now move to to another question from the audience. This one is from JP. You know who you are. That's fine. And JP says, how would this panel suggest that capacity building be measured to ensure the outcomes are being realized and that there's a good return on the investment that we're making? So this is always one of the things that we're looking for. How can we measure what we're achieving? How can we demonstrate that? I will pop that question across to Hugo, if I may.
Yeah, thanks very much, David. Well, it's been looking at there, and thanks to JP and those who've supported this question. It's one of those challenges that I think any state would face when providing assistance, capacity building assistance, is actually measuring what is being delivered and how it's being effective, and also on top of that is the sustainability of the whole measures that you put in place as well for long term. So I think it comes down to really probably setting the parameters through either a detailed memorandum of understanding, and completing some terms of reference so there's no misunderstanding from both parties as to what you're trying to achieve through the process. But it's also then getting, as Bernard addressed quite eloquently, is that political will, right from the top, right from the word go, so that both states, A, the provider, and B, the receiver of capacity, understands what the intent is of the capacity that's being delivered. The measurability is always a difficult one because you've got to then identify potentially KPIs, key performance indicators that then are going to be fed back into that system. But really, you've got to have an effective system-based approach to any aviation security matter. And if you have detailed procedures or policies that then build on systems around, particularly around quality assurance, I think that you're going to then get a better level of measurability. Obviously, feeding into that is the quality oversight. Now, to actually deliver detailed quality oversight, you're going to need trained and competent people to fulfil that role in a regulatory perspective. But also you want some internal quality assurance. So the receiver of that capacity building has to have their own program around developing some internal quality assurance processes. Now, feeding out of that also, you need to have a level of management review, a part of that whole internal quality process, that feeds back into the system, that does a high-level review of the deliverables. Are we actually achieving what we're trying to achieve, and how are we going about it? But most importantly, that needs to be recorded in a manner that then can show either there has been an improvement or there's been a decline in the process that you're trying to implement. Now, that's both good and bad reporting. But if there's bad reporting, for instance, you need some analysis work around that to identify the root cause. And by identifying the root cause, you can put some structures and processes in place that can then be brought together in a program to resolve those issues, working with that state. So I'm hoping I've answered your question to a reasonable level. If there's anything that needs to be clarified from what I've said, I'm happy to discuss that after this or during the panel as it continues. So thanks, David.
Thank you, Hugo. Poppy.
Oh, do you want to go first?
It's okay, it doesn't matter. Thank you. He used to do this when you were in. Yeah. Anyway. So just to add on what Hugo was saying, in fact, for some reasons I was prepared for this answer. Sorry, for this question, or what did I say? I was prepared for this question in terms of the measurement. Because, as I did indicate earlier, technical assistance has been happening over and over. But the question is, how does it get measured? Laurie spoke about the regional offices. We know they are there. But what then becomes the role of the regional offices in terms of facilitating or playing a central role in terms of coordinating assistance from the partners or from the states who want to provide assistance and so on. So I strongly believe that ICAO needs to play a central role in terms of coordinating and facilitating technical assistance. I believe that perhaps we may need to have a dashboard. It's something that can be explored. I'm not saying it must happen tomorrow, but I think it's something that can be explored. The good thing is that we do have data. We have the audit outcomes or the audit results, which are known between ICAO and respective states. So anyone who wants to provide technical assistance, it becomes a bilateral engagement between the two parties. ICAO, of course, being in the center. My belief is that then ICAO, when you talk about targeted assistance, surely the audit outcomes or the audit results will show where the deficiencies are. And if we are to migrate towards a targeted approach in terms of providing assistance, then we should be able to be closing some findings. So any targeted any assistance that must be provided, it is my belief that it needs to be assisting to improve a system. For instance, if there is a finding on training, a donor who wants to provide technical assistance on training, that should be closing one of the findings. And then we start seeing incrementally the capacity building being effective in that the EI increases, the security culture gets improved, and so on. But I think what will then be challenging, even after measuring, is the staying power. will the state that is being assisted be able to sustain and maintain? I think the question of political will, as Bernard was articulating, then becomes key, because it's one thing to provide assistance, close a finding, but it is another to maintain, such that we don't keep going back and dealing one and the same finding over and over. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Poppy and Hugo. I'd like to pick on something that that Hugo had alluded to. And really, if you look at the question from JP, the measurement of the effectiveness of the capacity building effort given can only show after that effort is over and not there and then. So for example, if let's say that the 5 of us are sent on a capacity building mission to country A for 1 week, you can't measure the effectiveness at the end of that week. The effectiveness is measured much later on. So for example, if let's say we talk about security screeners, if in the next 10 months they picked up no bombs going through the X-ray, have they succeeded? Do you think it was effective? Or do you want them to be picking up a bomb every other day to say, that's very effective? You need to ask yourself the question, which is which? In my opinion, I prefer the first scenario where they don't pick up any bomb at all. Now, another thing I can suggest to JP's question is, after a capacity building effort has been provided, the organization that received the capacity building assistance could consider things like scenario training. You put the team through scenarios, put the team through situations after the training is over, could be 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, doesn't matter. But it is ready to stretch the imagination and utilize the knowledge and skills that was given to them. Because we must expect threats to evolve, situations to change, but more importantly, you want whoever has been trained to be able to react effectively. In terms of return on investment, that depends on the state that is asking for the assistance or receiving the assistance. What do we mean by return on investment? The challenge I see is that in many instances, capacity building efforts, once given and it's over, it's over. There is no follow through. So for example, if state A provides state B with some capacity building assistance, could we include a situation where state A comes back 6 months later to say, how's everything? Here are some scenarios to test you, or here are some situation exercises to put you through, as a follow through, versus it's over and everybody moves on with life, you know. That to me is one of the challenges that I see, but I may be wrong. Thank you.
I would just add real quick, and I'll be short, David, I promise. I would just add real quick that where sustainment is concerned, and as you mentioned, sustainment visits. Come back, see how things are going. If they've reverted back to old habits, or if the training has not stuck, so to speak, then we need to employ things like mentors. So what's the next part? And place someone in the operation with the supervisors to ensure that the supervisors are effectively and actively supervising and that they're maintaining the learning that was taught.
Thank you all. What I think I'll do now, if we can, is we'll move to the first audience poll. Is that okay? So I'll just let Kirsty get that up on the screen for you. So, the question is, so from your perspective, your organization, where you come from, what is your biggest challenge in implementing aviation security? And there are the different options there. Resources, infrastructure, all of the above. I see that's, this is live. This is immediate, right? Okay, wow. So you guys are used to using this thing now. So I had to be trained, actually. You're all over this already. Great. Well, there we are. So instant feedback. Resources, infrastructure, all of the above is now at the top. I don't sure that works, actually. It's no longer below them, but all of the above. Okay, so everything. Resources, infrastructure, focus, prioritization, knowledge. Okay. We've got 5 minutes till coffee. One of my golden rules is we always make the break on time. I'm conscious also that we haven't heard again from Richard. So what I'm going to do after the coffee break is come back. We've got a whole series of questions that you very kindly sent through. And so what I'm going to propose for the sake of timeliness is that we take the break now, because if we start a question, we'll run over. And when we come back, I've got a couple of questions, one of which I'll be putting to Richard, one of your questions. Okay. Denis, over to you, sir.
David, I love your golden rule. Makes life easier for everyone. Okay, we'll have our coffee break, courtesy of L3 Harris Technologies, and we'll be back at 3:30, and following David's golden rule, 3:30 sharp. Okay? Thank you. See you in a few minutes.